Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Every Rostermania year I always wonder how many changes are we going to see this year, and 9 teams going to change 10, 11, but only in incredibly exceptional and rare circumstances do you get all 12. But that's what we're going to talk about today. Rumours emerging that it's a done deal. The world champions, the New York Subliners, are making a change. Priestahh out, Simp in after some contract drama over the last few days. Why haven't his teammates said anything about this? How's he getting screwed over this hard? Where's he going to go next? Remarkable story today. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. So plenty of players looking for the next opportunity right now. iLLeY is one of them. We think that he might be on that team with Awakening, Huke and maybe Standy. Not sure what organisation they would join if this goes through. But also the Miami Heretics. Rumours were emerging, and I think it's still very likely that Heretics will exist in partnership with the Florida guys in some respect, because we've seen Vickle, and I mean they dropped everyone but Vickle, and Vickle was meant to be part of their next year's Spanish team that was meant to be under the Miami Heretics. But it's been noted here that the Mutineers trademark still exists, but the Miami Heretics trademark has been abandoned. So the idea of them changing the brand from Florida Mutineers to Miami Heretics might well be off the table. They might have another idea in mind for what they want to call it if they do want to change the brand around, but as it stands, it's going to say the Florida Mutineers. Now, whether that means they're going to change their mind in terms of even partnering with Heretics and going down that Spanish route, maybe, maybe not. But yeah, not exactly sure if this is a positive or a negative thing. I was actually quite looking forward to the change. But then again, Mutineers have one of the better brandings in the league, so I don't mind it staying around, because I think, you know, teams like Dallas Empire always look back on and think, damn, that branding was so good, and we don't get it anymore, unfortunately. So some nice brands like Mutineers, I mean, they've got sick jerseys and stuff, at least as far as I'm concerned. Drazah is going to join FaZe. That's the understanding, and things have been coming increasingly clear over the last few days. And once we heard about the Drazah thing, okay, we thought that maybe OpTic would go for Sib, and Sib was in the conversation for that OpTic spot, but we'll get into that in a second. The fact that Kenny has led the way, but now Priestahh is on the market, which will change people's perceptions. I still see a lot of talk about, you know, OpTic Kenny's a terrible idea. I'm not, you know, I don't agree with that personally, but still, many would like Priestahh there instead, and he is available. I don't think he's going to be going there though, but we'll see where he might be going in the coming minutes. But he's not going to be after winning 3 events and the World Championship just this year on the New York Subliners. He's not going to be there anymore, and it's a crazy set of storylines, because we heard about this the other day, right, and we've talked about contract stuff on the Los Angeles Thieves, and we'll get into more of that even later on today, but especially on the Subliners, what's going on there? So we heard this a few days ago, 3rd of July, that contract talks were rocky, and Priestahh was basically getting lowballed hard by the offer that the Subliners were coming up with. Kismet was getting a bit of a bump. I imagine Kismet wasn't on a particularly big contract, because when he joins them in Vanguard, he was from Challengers, so I don't know if they were giving him a minimum or something, you know, slightly above the minimum, or something reasonable but not emphatic, and they extended his deal on a 1+1, so he's probably on that again. So I think this year it makes sense you're going to bump him up. But when you've just won 3 events plus champs, you probably think, I'm at least going to stay the same and make the same money. And when your organisation is coming to you and trying to pull you down, it's tricky, right? Priestahh probably could have taken the cuts possibly and be on a much lower contract, and it would be a bit weird, I think, that dynamic with your teammates when you know that Kismet's just got a raise, Hydra's making a bag, and, you know, you're sitting there, just got dropped down by your team. And last year, after the World Championship there, Thieves supposedly took a pay cut so they could stay together because their organisation wanted to drop the salaries, and we'll talk about that in more detail later. But I imagine Priestahh didn't really want to do that. Now, we'll dive into what the case is for Sib, because you're imagining that Sib is on whatever contract they offered Priestahh but he said no to. So they're still not paying an exceptional amount of money, or they're paying more for Sib because they think Sib's better. And this might be one of the points here, is that just because your team won champs doesn't mean you can't pack a punch, which is a crazy thing to think about. But, you know, it might be what they're thinking in this case to some degree, that Sib has more upside. And honestly, if you think about it, like Sib's ceiling, comparing that, I mean, imagine, you know, Kismet and Hydro and Sib just gunning you down. That's very scary. And Priestahh was definitely a very important part of them winning the World Championship and having the success that they had. Was he the most important part? No. I would say that he was probably, you know, he was the weakest link if there was a weakest link. And that's not a slight on Priestahh, that's just the way the team dynamic was set up. So if there was anyone that was, you know, if they were literally forced to make a change by the CDF for whatever reason, Priestahh would be the man that would make way in that case. But it is incredibly hard to justify such a change when you've just won so much, you've had great success, culture is a massive part of that. And Priestahh as a player, he's won the most LAN events, I'm pretty sure, we'll see this in a few minutes time, of any player in the CDL era. Like, he wins a lot. It doesn't really matter what team he's on, it tends to be competitive. And there's obviously a reason behind that, right? I mean, he dropped 3 kills or whatever it was in that control game or something. Was it a champs, like some early part of the bracket, and maybe a major 5, but he didn't let it phase him, right? He bounced back and played well the next map. And, you know, that's the type of player you get with Priestahh. But Sib is going to be the guy to go through. After contract negotiations with Priestahh fell through, okay, I'm guessing Sib's going to be on the same money that Priestahh was offered. And this is a massive opportunity for Sib, but then again, could it even be an intention to pack a punch here? He was their #1 target if Priestahh didn't work out. He's the man they're going to be going for. And the world champions breaking apart. This happens on incredibly rare bases. This is, I think, the first time this has ever happened in COD history when it hasn't been forced in some way or another. We'll kind of see the details of this in a second, but when the whole franchise era was happening, the United team that won the World Championship back in 2019, they couldn't stay together because their organisation did get into franchising, so there was no way, and they had to split apart. Different organisations got them. And then it went from 5v5 to 4v4 the next year, so teams were forced to break apart. But ever since then, and even before then, especially when the World Championship was mid-season, the World Champs never split up. Like, it just doesn't happen. But maybe subliners, and even some of the teammates of Priestahh, might be looking at all these other teams. FaZe, I think they might only get marginally better, but I think FaZe get better. I think OpTic get better from where they were last year. I think Toronto certainly get better from where they were last year. And yes, New York won a lot, including champs. Was their team, if they stood still, going to go into next season being the #1 kind of potential? I don't think so. I think they would have been, you know, in the 2nd, 3rd ballpark range, but they're trying to respond, which is crazy. It just goes to show how ridiculous this Rostermania has been a lot on the top teams, that subliners are like, well, you know what, we can probably do even better here. And Sib, they wanted him back in Cold War, obviously a very talented player, and they think he'll work really well with these guys. But from a cultural perspective and from that fit angle, it's going to be interesting to see. But they are upgrading. I mean, the world champions are straight up upgrading their firepower here. And firepower isn't the be all and end all. Priestahh was an important facet to how their team performed. These are his numbers on the season, but these are Sib's numbers, you know, on the season and compared to last year. And just in terms of damage dealt and impact done. And that's the thing. Hydra and Kismet were often, those were the guys, you know, they were doing the damage on the subliners roster. Skies was sitting back and chilling. Priestahh had his good maps, especially early on in the season, but, you know, had his bad maps at times as well. But it was really Hydra and Kiz, I think, that were doing a lot of the damage there for the subliners, and that worked out for them. But if you upgrade what, you know, sometimes if your ARs are the ones taking over the series, then you can be even more potent. Why haven't his teammates taken some sort of action on this? And, okay, you wouldn't necessarily think that they have to, but as we're going to talk about later today with Thieves, last year they were basically told, I think, by Thieves, they're like, look, we can't pay you guys as much as we were before, so if you'd like to stick around, you're going to have to take a pay cut. And they decided, you know what, let's do that. And you guys also probably remember that when the Dallas Empire team was being formed at the start of the Modern Warfare 2019 season, Huke took a pay cut of like 100 grand so that Hastro and Envy could afford Shotzzy's buyout, because he was on Splice and like what would become Toronto. So they bought him out from that, and Huke took a massive pay cut to allow Envy to actually have the money to make that work. So then we get to the subliner situation, and, you know, Hydra and Kismet and Skies, theoretically, they're seeing their teammates into these contract negotiations, and, you know, there's an argument, and Merc says it here, well, look at it now, it's like, you know, should those guys be talking to their org, right, and saying, look, hey, we just won the world championship with this guy, we want to stay together as a team of 4, if you want to take like a pay cut of whatever it is from us to give it to Priestahh so we can keep him around, then let's do it. And that has happened in the past with Huke, so not doing that makes you think that they weren't really, you know, 100% sold on keeping Priestahh around necessarily, because otherwise they might have gone down this route. Now, I'm not saying that players should be giving up salary and stuff just for no reason, because, you know, it's tricky enough to come by as it stands, especially in the esports landscape, but if they really wanted to stick together, you would think they might have found a way internally to make it work. I mean, Clay talks about how whenever he's been dropped, he comes back leading the pack, and most of the time it's worked out for him. But, I mean, yeah, it's kind of crazy that how many times Clay has been dropped after winning a lot. We'll have a look at that here in a second, but this is what Merc said in a reply. So he says, you know, extremely odd behaviour, champions get paid. And, you know, as Merc says, they won 3 events. His teammates should step up and help him. It's total BS. Unless this is what they wanted, then they should come out and call it like it is. Because we don't have anything from his teammates, right? I mean, they just won the World Championship with this guy. guy 3 weeks ago, and you know, here we are, radio silence from the subliners camp and the players as Priestahh just gets basically screwed over and forced out of the team for clearly contractual reasons. So you know, as Nameless is like 100% they should be defending him. Have we ever really seen this in CODs? So it's difficult to say, like, whether the team came along and said, hey, we're looking to get Simp for Priestahh possibly because we don't want to pay, we don't think Priestahh's worth what he wants basically, and the players are like, you know what, maybe that's fair enough, maybe we can upgrade in that sense, take it to even another level and try and compete even further. So it's a pretty wild story actually, and it's just so rare that you see this. As I mentioned, these are the examples, the only examples ever of a team winning champs and breaking up, and the other two were forced. I mean, there was no way that this team of 5 could stay together with the salary cap that existed at the time. There was just no way that all 5 of these United guys were going to get signed by one organisation. Like, people were paying bags for these guys, and for good reason. And then Dallas Empire were forced to split up because it was 4v4. They would have stuck it out. So it's pretty much the only time we've ever seen, really, where a team wins champs and within a few weeks is breaking apart. And the exact reasons it's quite difficult to say, but I do imagine that in large part this is because a lot of the other teams have tried to pack-a-punch their roster heavily, and subliners feel like, well, we might need to do the same to stay on pace with these other teams. Now, is this actually a pack-a-punch, though? That's the thing. Sib is clearly a great player, as JKL says, but, you know, when you win half of the events in the season, including champs, how much more punch is there to pack, as he says? I thought was quite a nice way to phrase it. And yes, Sib might have greater firepower, and he probably has a higher floor, but still, does he have the same comms? Does he have the same, you know, winning ability, let's just say, as a guy like Priestahh does, and what that means for their culture? It's a very interesting one, but also for Sib, a great opportunity, but one that you can't really squander, right? I mean, if you're Sib, you're joining the team of the 3 world champions, you know, you're really expected to deliver now, because Sib's been touted as a great talent, and I think that he is, but now is most certainly the chance to prove it. The other piece on this is that clearly OpTic, they could have gone for Sib if they really wanted. They went for Kenny instead, and that's why subliners are getting Sib. And, you know, between the two of them, it's quite interesting in the same way we talk about teammates kind of questions and decisions internally. Preds would probably have been asked by the OpTic guys, do you want Sib? Like, should we bring him on instead of Drazah? Now we can't get Drazah because he's going to FaZe. And Pred clearly said, you know what? No, let's get Kenny instead. Okay, maybe that's not the case. That's obviously speculation, but you know what I mean? It's a similar idea where maybe Pred having teamed with Sib, it was like, you know what? I think for us, it's better to get a guy like Kenny. Now, before we close out here, let's have a look at where Priestahh might potentially go, because the rumour is, as Scrumental comes up with, main AR Slasher, Flex Ghosty, SMG Snoopy, SMG Priestahh, and as Jacob L says in the replies, a very interesting squad you put together there. So implying that this is a actual possibility. Now, Priestahh is one of the most flexible players of all time. He's been playing at the flex this past season, but back in the day, he was even like a main AR type player on Minnesota in Vanguard, it felt like at times. But before that, he was a great SMG. I mean, the Black Ops 4 days, even World War II, really good on the sub. As I say, one of the most versatile players ever, can definitely run it to a good level. I think people think that he's terrible on the sub because when he was playing on that Minnesota team in, was it Cold War, right? He was like the only sub and there was kind of like 3 AR players on his team, so he was getting left out to dry. I still think he can work in this role, but it is controversial if they were to do this, Boston, and force Priestahh back onto the sub. On a roster where if it is a sub-heavy game, they might get exposed pretty heavily, but yeah, that is an option there, and I think this makes sense, because I've said this the other day, that if you're going to form a team with Ghosty and Snoopy around Slasher, I think Slasher will want someone else with a bit more experience, and they did play together, Slasher and Priestahh, on that 100 Thieves team back in Black Ops 4 when Priestahh was the grapple sorg. He was the absolute fastest guy on the team, and it worked out very well for them. So that's one of the benefits Priestahh has, just super flexible player. Arguably the most versatile player in COD history, to be honest, at least when you look at accomplishments and championships won, and subliners are losing that, and maybe Boston, you know, nice rivalry there, are the ones to be gaining. But very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.